Scroll through Instagram for even a minute and you'll notice something. Influencers switching between 10 different outfits, all of it designed to create the feeling that you too need something new, something trendy, something right now. And before you realize it, that dress you added to your cart on impulse, the one that felt like a great deal, has set in motion a chain of consequences far beyond your screen. This is the story of fast fashion and what it truly costs. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Climate Economy from The Hindu. I am Kunal Shankar. Fast fashion runs on a simple principle: spot a trend, replicate it cheaply, and flood the market before it loses relevance.
Phrase fast fashion actually was coined in the early 90s to describe the opening of a Zara store in New York City and its ability to turn design into clothes.
Zara was one of the first to master this model, rolling out new designs in stores every 2 weeks. But now companies like Shein have taken it even further, using AI-powered design tools to launch thousands of new items every day, with ultra-responsive factories ready to produce it in near real time. Let's take a closer look at Zara and its parent company Inditex, not just as a brand, but as a global logistics powerhouse that has perfected the art of speed at any cost. In order to meet fast-moving demand, Inditex built a supply chain that increasingly depends on air freight, despite its well-documented environmental impact. To understand what this means on the ground and how the global fast fashion machine really operates, we spoke with Albert Hahn, a video journalist based in London at Context, the Thomson Reuters Foundation's journalism arm. He led an investigation into Inditex and its practices.
Right. Our investigation was focused in Bangladesh, but we know that about half of Inditex's production happens sort of in other countries in Asia, such as India and Turkey. And our data showed that in all three countries, there were increases in air shipping. One of the interesting things that we saw from our trade data was that Bangladesh is one of the main producers for Inditex. In fact, Bangladesh is often known as sort of the garment factory of the world. Inditex's air shipping has been growing so much from Bangladesh that the country's main airport in Dhaka cannot handle the volume of air shipments. And they're actually at the moment building out Dhaka airport ostensibly because of the air shipping need. And Inditex is one of the biggest clients at Dhaka airport. So as a solution, Inditex has been sending large volumes of garments by truck via land to India and then shipping it out, mostly from airports such as Delhi and Mumbai and other places. That volume was about 100,000 kilos or $1.6 million worth of clothes. In 2024, that was about 14 million kilos or $200 million worth of cargo. When it comes to sort of the climate pledges, what's interesting is that Inditex has promised to cut its scope 3 emissions. For companies, they separate their carbon emissions into different scopes. And scope 3 is the widest one. It's the carbon footprint of a company in its supply chain and not directly created by the company. And it could be tangentially related to, its suppliers, where it sources its raw material from. And Inditex, in its annual report, promised to cut its carbon scope 3 emissions by 51% in 2030. But so far, it's hasn't been able to reduce it. And in fact, the company's emissions from transport increased by 10% in 2024.
Zara has responded to Context findings by stating that air transport is only used for a small percentage of its shipments and that it remains committed to achieving its climate goals by 2030. The company also said It works closely with suppliers to meet sustainability targets. And at the heart of this supply chain, at the very bottom of it, are the workers who make the clothes, many of them young women in countries like Bangladesh, earning an average of just $72 a month, a wage so low it barely covers basic survival, let alone allows for any kind of security or upward mobility.
What we've learned previously is that in Bangladesh's ready-made garment sector, there's a large amount of exploitation in the form of delayed wages or no overtime pay or accusations of forced labor. Multiple factory workers told us that if they want to make sure production is on track, managers and owners tell workers, you have to work extra hours, you have to work on your days off. And unfortunately, in some cases, they're not being compensated for their time. And sometimes they even suffer alleged verbal or physical abuse, in order to push them to work faster and faster. Oftentimes, a factory actually has to pay if their production is delayed. Say if you're a factory in the outskirts of Dhaka and flooding happens very often during the monsoon season, and your workers can't make it to work, your production's delayed, you have to catch up with the production, and one way of catching up with the production is to ship it quicker, because air shipping can cut down the shipping time from about 12 to 15 days to as little as 12 to 15 hours. So the problem in that case, though, for a factory is that air shipping is expensive, and in a business where margins are razor thin, paying for expensive air shipping is detrimental to a factory and its employees.
In late 2023, thousands of garment workers took to the streets to demand a raise from $72 to $208 a month. A wage still modest by any standard, yet the industry instead said it was unaffordable, even as the brands they served continued posting billion-dollar profits. This imbalance is not really new. In 2013, the Rana Plaza building collapse in Dhaka killed over 1,100 workers and sparked global outrage. But more than a decade later, many of the systemic issues that made that disaster possible remain unresolved.
আজকে আলছি 24শে এপ্রিল রানা প্লাজার দৃশ্যে আমার ওই জায়গায় কাজ করছিল। এখন দুর্ঘটনায় সে মারা গেছে। তার লাশ আমি শনাক্ত করতে পারি নাই। আমার ছেলে, আমার মেয়ের ডিএনএ টেস্টে রক্ত দিয়ে ডিএনএ রিপোর্টে আমি লাশ মনে করো শনাক্ত করতে পারছি। লাশ কিন্তু আমি হাতে পাই নাই। লাশ জোরান মফিজুল ইসলাম কবরস্থানে দাফন করা হয়েছে।
বিচারের প্রহসনে আর কতদিন শ্রমিক হত্যার বিচারের দাবি পিছিয়ে যাবে? দেখেন, ৪১ জন আসামি করে যে মামলাটা করা হয়েছিল, সেই মামলার ৫৯৪ জন সাক্ষী ছিল। সেখানে দীর্ঘ ১২ বছরে আমরা জানতে পারছি যে মাত্র ৯৫ জনের সাক্ষী গ্রহণ করছে। তাহলে মাত্র ৯৫ জনের সাক্ষী যদি গ্রহণ করতে ১২ বছর লাগে, তাহলে আর ৫০০ জনের সাক্ষ্য কত দিনে গ্রহণ করা হবে? আদৌ কি এই শ্রমিকরা বিচারটা পাবে কিনা?
The environmental consequences are no less severe. Textile production is among the most polluting industries in the world. Globally, clothing consumption has surged. We now buy 60% more clothes than we did in the year 2000. Yet we keep each item for only half as long, creating a cycle of churn that feeds an overflowing stream of textile waste. Every year, over 100 billion garments are produced, the majority of which are either thrown away, burnt or dumped in landfills. And fashion's footprint doesn't stop at waste. The industry now contributes around 10% of all global carbon emissions, which is more than the combined output of aviation and maritime shipping. In Dhaka, the Buriganga River, once central to life, trade and transport, has turned black and is now biologically dead.
Many of the rivers are dead. Rivers around the capital are dead. Rivers around the big cities are dead. Now the rivers across the country are going to be dying. So this unregulated industrialization and pollution, if you can't stop it, then you must find all the rivers are becoming drain of the country.
Unfortunately, the laws we have related to the punishment of the environmental criminals, the law is very weak and it cannot prevent them. So we have to go around the law. We may have to go for that name and shame approach and try to change the law and raise public awareness. You cannot have a real growth, real development without a good environmental system, good ecological system.
Testing has revealed dangerous levels of mercury, arsenic, and lead in the river, and the Buriganga is not an isolated case. Across Asia and Africa, textile waste and untreated runoff is poisoning rivers, destroying ecosystems, and affecting the health of communities. Producing one cotton shirt uses around 700 gallons of water. A single pair of jeans requires over 2,000 gallons. Add to that the carbon footprint of transporting garments by air, which emits up to 30 times more carbon dioxide than shipping by sea, and this is increasing the scale of the damage. Zara, for example, ships around 26% or more than a fourth of all of its goods by air. Compare that to H&M, which ships just 4% that way. Some governments and international bodies are beginning to respond. The European Union, for instance, is working on a corporate due diligence directive that would require companies to trace and report environmental and labor practices across their supply chains. It goes beyond voluntary codes, establishing legal accountability and enabling fines or lawsuits for companies that fail to comply. France has passed an anti-waste law that bans the destruction of unsold stock and mandates recycling or donation instead. Germany's Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, on the other hand, introduced in 2023, obligates companies to monitor labor practices not just in their own factories but across suppliers as well. The European Union is in the process of rolling out the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, a policy designed to place a carbon price on imports from countries with less stringent environmental standards. While CBAM has been framed as a climate measure, critics argue that the act could disproportionately affect suppliers and factories in the global south, where resources to decarbonize are limited and where brands hold all the leverage. The mechanism, instead of holding companies like Zara accountable for the emissions that they generate by their own supply chains, risks transferring that responsibility onto the very factories already operating under extreme pressure. Meanwhile, the core drivers of overconsumption and emissions, mass production, global logistics, and constant demand in the developed world remain untouched. Following the investigation by Context, Albert was invited to present his findings before members of the European Parliament, providing first-hand insight into how supply chain emissions are rising and how voluntary corporate commitments are falling short. His deposition has helped inform ongoing conversations about binding regulation, reinforcing that the costs of fast fashion can no longer be hidden or ignored.
In terms of the fallout, our piece was very well received. And our film was, like you said, screened at the EU Parliament in Brussels as part of a panel on sustainable fashion and supply chain. We had multiple members of the European Parliament from countries such as France, Finland, and the Netherlands come together to watch the film, along with those interested from the general public. And these MEPs, who were from different political persuasions, noted that Europe has a power and responsibility to force or to obligate companies to do due diligence on their supply chains. They did acknowledge that given sort of the current world situation that we are in, with the trade war that's being levied by the US, with conflicts in multiple places, and an overall sort of shift towards the right in the EU, that things such as environmental targets or other kinds of goals could be put in the backseat, so to speak. But the EU still has sort of that power and the ability to inflict change. And to that end, there are initiatives being passed or being debated in the EU, such as the CSRD or the CSDDD. Both of these are legislations that regulate supply chain and which will require companies to identify and address human rights and environmental impacts within their supply chain.
Elsewhere, the United States is debating bills like the Fabric Act, which aims to enforce fair wages and greater transparency. India has discussed, for instance, labor reforms as well. But implementation remains stalled. Fast fashion isn't just about trends. It's about who gets left behind and what gets destroyed in the process. So, the next time you're tempted by a haul or a limited time discount, do take a moment. Thank you for watching this episode of The Climate Economy. If you like this show and would like to follow us on YouTube, click subscribe and hit the bell icon. Also, do write to us with your questions to climateeconomy@thehindu.co.in. Better still, send us a video recording and we will try and feature them in our upcoming episodes. Bye for now.